everyone. Scott Pantel here, CEO of LSI, and I'm with my friend Dave Uffer, partner at Alira Health, medtech industry veteran, spent time with Abbott, Boston Scientific, Integra, Covidien, Medtronic. Dave's been around for a while. I've had the pleasure of knowing him for quite a bit of that time. Dave, welcome.
Thanks much, Scott. Pleasure to be here.
So good to see you. And I know that the weather out here in California is slightly different than I think what you're experiencing today in Boston. What kind of temps do you have out there?
Oh, about a balmy 33 degrees. Foot of snow in the last week on the ground, so we're doing just fine. Typical.
Well, Dave, thanks again for being here. Thanks for all your support. Alira is a really important partner of the event that we have coming up here in May. You guys have been partners since day one. And so I just wanted to kind of pick your brain, get current with you on what's going on at Alira, get a little feedback on the event that we had this past year, and hopefully get folks excited about what we have coming up in May. So get us current, tell us what you're up to, and then I want to jump into some questions about the event and the panel that you'll be running.
Sure. For 2020 under Alira Health, it was probably our largest growth year ever. In the face of COVID, we had very early on anticipated a little bit of retraction in the market. We're a service provider and we engage large and small companies alike, and we kind of anticipated a pause in the market, and after about 30 days, we went the other direction, figuring that a lot of our client bases would really have some change in their business under COVID. So we actually went into our largest expansion hiring that we had ever undergone. And perhaps blind luck or good strategic planning, it all panned out, and that we had probably our busiest year ever. So it was quite an active medtech and healthcare market overall.
I'm sure it was the planning and the talent that you guys have over there, and congratulations on all the success you guys have been having. So Dave, you and I have known each other for a number of years. We've been to investor meetings together. I know that you attend a ton of them. Can you tell us a little bit about how the event that we're running here stands out, what you like about it, and maybe some things that we should focus on for this year?
Yeah, I'd start by saying what really attracted me early on and as you say, from day one, when you showed me what you were trying to accomplish, anything that can drive our ecosystem in medtech by pairing investors and leading early stage companies, I'm all for. There's always a need for continued investment and attention in medtech. And we see conferences like LSI Emerging Tech helping to facilitate that. As you note, I probably am at anywhere from a half a dozen to a dozen different investor conferences each year. And what really jazzed me about LSI's Emerging Tech was really the quality of the companies and the leadership of those companies that I saw that far exceeded what I've been through many other conferences. Just you gave me an early snapshot of who you were inviting, who you had screened, because I'm sure you had hundreds of applicants to be part of that initial conference that you led last year. And those companies, while we knew probably 20, maybe 30% of them from historic engagement, the others were just such leading edge companies, and again, very seasoned veterans, more so than we see at many of the other conferences. So we thought their commercial readiness, the investor interest that would be at this meeting was ripe for our participation.
And I remember you and I having a conversation. It was actually towards the end of the event, and I'd asked you about the format, and I think your comment to me was that you hadn't really been in the ballroom. I think you had just meeting after meeting lined up. So, and I know you also brought quite a substantial team to the meeting last year. How did the meetings go? Did you have the right size team? What can we expect to see this year from Alira?
Yeah, great question. While I really enjoy some of those general market discussions and get to see a lot of the presenting companies, I probably had one-on-one meetings with between me and the team there with 80% of the 100 companies that you had presenting. So it really wasn't that imperative that I sit in the ballroom and see their pitch. We had deep discussions on a one-on-one basis with nearly all of them. When you ask about the team there, we got very aggressive, and that's really due to the nature of the firm, Scott. We cover nearly every service that you would expect through the life cycle of a company, from formation all the way through to exit. So I had to have each of my practice area leaders be at the meeting, so we could engage companies and present not only singular practices that we have, but where we approach companies and really win their loyalty is with an integrated approach. So I had people from our medical affairs practice representing regulatory affairs and our CRO and clinical affairs. I had a practice leader, my VP of health economics and market access, one of my strategy consultants that works at the corporate level all the way down to go-to-market strategies for products. And then, of course, investment banking. Very interesting for us in that we do a significant amount of partnering licensing, but we actually had some clients that were interested in engaging on M&A. Even though they're at an investor conference, they look for a dual path. Sometimes they are ripe for M&A, even at that early stage, or at least the discussions and the introductions to the strategics that they ask us to help facilitate. So in that kept me running like a madman throughout the entire conference, inside, outside, on the lawn, on the balcony. As far as the setup of it, well, I think there was just amazing space. The way that you had the setup facilitated those meetings. Look, all of the pitching companies go there to be able to rapidly give somebody a snapshot of who they are, what they're doing, and the investors hopefully will, if they already haven't pre-selected those companies based on what they saw in advance, they're intrigued enough to then have that one-on-one. And I think it wasn't just me. I saw companies running back and forth between all of the rooms, and that to me is the sign of a good investor conference, where you have that company that's motivated to, or the investor that's motivated to meet those companies that fits their investment thesis, and they find something intriguing about the technology and those who are driving it.
Great, Dave. And I know that things change. Our industry is quite dynamic. We're in this COVID era. What are some segments that you're really dialed into that you guys are maybe more or less interested in? Talk us about market segments and areas of focus that you guys might be exploring this year.
Well, you mentioned COVID, so of course, infection and prevention and control. It's one of our core areas of focus for Alira Health. It goes back to our history from 20 years ago, where we were really founded in our DNA, and that took an amazing amount of attention throughout COVID, both in diagnostics and then in PPE and anything that was infection prevention related at the facility level, both at acute care as well as post-acute care facilities. So that was really key for 2020. But what we also saw and got excited about was monitoring, as well as more so remote patient monitoring. I tracked over $4 billion of investment into digital health, but remote patient monitoring had quite a slow go at it throughout the past 5 years. A lot of technology development, not as much utilization and implementation as companies were pitching their value proposition, and the clinicians and the providers were a little bit slow to integrate this and understanding the use case. By necessity, out of COVID, and be able to engage their patients with the remote access to them through these digital technologies, we saw a major uptick this past year in case use and the value proposition being demonstrated and vetted out. I can't say every one of them is validated, but at least they're getting a good look and they were getting into clinical practice. So we were supremely excited about that. As far as what else we'd look to see this year, I lead a specialty practice in advanced surgical technologies and robotics. We're publishing on that area, and I'd say every strategic has asked us about a viewpoint on that. They have a lot of attention to this, and not just traditional disposables and hardware, but really looking at the OR of the future. Of course, areas such as cardiovascular and interventional medicine, that still has a lot of cachet in the marketplace. A lot of leading technologies continue to be developed there. And of course, a significant amount of capital being deployed in those sectors continuously.
That's great. So shifting gears a little bit, and because you have had so much experience working for big strategics, been attending these investor meetings for some time, we get CEOs of venture funded startups that are there. They're raising more capital. They want to raise visibility with strategics. We're pleasantly surprised with the investor turnout last year, and we're even more pleasantly surprised and really delighted with the turnout that we'll have lined up this year on the investor and the strategic side. But putting back on your strategic hat, if you're a strategic, why should I, why go to a meeting like this? Is it worth my time? I know you're seeing a bunch of deal flow. You have deals coming to you. They're in your inbox. Is it a wise use of time? Sort of a loaded question. May not get the answer I want, but put the strategic hat on for me and tell me why you ought to think about going to or not going to a meeting like this.
Yeah, look, if you're one of the 10+ billion dollar companies or even 5+ billion dollar med tech companies, every one of these startups is going to find you. But I think it's a little bit inefficient at times. It's nice to be able to receive a deck from a company and an inbound inquiry, but I think it's even more effective to be able to meet them there at the conference, sit down and have a discussion with them, have that personal interaction. Even now, today, we're doing this through video, and it's much more efficient than a phone call. I think it's a little more personal, and you get to see a little bit deeper, but there's really nothing like being on site and sitting down with companies that are of interest for your particular business unit. If you're at the business unit level, and certainly in corporate development, you carry a host of different businesses under your domain. So I think you get a lot of different look-sees at many different technologies. Some of them might slip through the cracks, and others you might have had engagement with it. It's always very advantageous to have that continued dialogue with these companies.
All right, that's great. So last year, you were kind enough to run a panel for us. We had CEOs of big large cap companies, CEOs of big strategics that had turned entrepreneur that were now running venture funded startups. You got to ask some questions about, the old days, the new days, and compare and contrast. And we had tremendous feedback on your panel. And so we've suckered you into doing another panel this year, and we're really thankful for your time. But this year, you're going to be talking to large cap companies about deal making. What are some things that we may hear about? What are some topics that you think might be worth being on the forefront of your program this year?
Yeah, I'm really excited about this one as well. Quite a different tact than we had last year, and I think you've got a really great panel aligned. People that I've either been colleagues with at the same company or that I integrate with and have dialogue with on a continual basis for the past 4 years since Alira Health. What I felt was really intriguing about this year's panel is everybody's wondering, what about strategics and their thesis for deploying capital in M&A throughout the COVID? Are they retracting a little bit? Are they being more aggressive? What are their attitudes? And then I think with a little bit less engagement, you don't always know exactly where some new strategies lie within their corporate development, as well as down at the business unit. These strategies pivot on a yearly basis. I can't say they completely change, but maybe you add a new field that is of interest, and not everybody knows that. So I think it's going to be important to hear from these leaders in the large strategics, where they're looking for investment. Number one, as this is an investor conference, for either deploying minority equity investments or other types of vehicles that they have for investing in early stage companies, perhaps some types of partnering. I know some strategics are more keen towards distribution right now, and using that as a vehicle to then look at the company really well, get some experience in the market, and then perhaps lead to an M&A. And I'd really like to discuss where the thoughts are for M&A. Are these tuck-ins? Are these very large new verticals that they're exploring, and what in between?
It's going to be a lot of fun, and I always find it interesting. You'll have some strategics in attendance, and you kind of look at the roster, you scratch your head, and you wonder why they might be there. And I think you're right. I think often there's some white space or some new areas they're looking in, and you don't find out, until a year or two later why they were actually there. And that's always really interesting, I think, to be on the lookout for. So really excited to have you at the meeting. Again, thank you, Dave, for your support. You guys have been great. We are so grateful to have Alira as one of our partners, a founding sponsor of this event. Is there anything you want to share with our viewers, anything folks should know about what you guys are up to that you can share with us, or do they need to come see you in May to find out?
Yeah, again, it's really about our integrated approach across all of the life cycle of firms. We work with, again, startups at their initial inception and development of a new leading technology, all the way through to $30 billion operating companies. While I represent the medtech, and that's what this conference is about, we still do have a pharma biotech practice. But I'd say every year we are making 2 acquisitions, and we don't acquire scale. We're always acquiring new service areas. So this year is going to be focused on building out a new patient engagement practice that we have, which is a little bit new to some of the folks, and others readily understand what they might want to do early stage, but looking to build and develop that out a little bit further. That's been a pretty exciting area. Health economics still remains a very large growth, and I don't want to say a new field, but it's grown into itself much further than I've ever seen before. So those are some of the new areas that we'll talk about during the LSI conference with those key clients we meet with.
That's great. Well, Dave, it's always a pleasure speaking with you. Again, thank you for your support and your time. Looking forward to seeing you in a couple months, where I can almost guarantee the weather will be plus at least 30 degrees where you're sitting right now. And
look, I'm not going to say that the Ritz-Carlton in Orange County was the #1 attraction feature. It doesn't hurt, but you know how we're such a big fan of this conference, and just see the amount of activity coming through it. Couldn't be any more supportive, Scott. So good luck through this, and look forward to seeing you out in Orange County in May.
Well, thank you, Dave. We couldn't do it without you guys. Thank you for your support. We'll see you soon.
Take care.
Take care, Dave.